everybody, Howard here with how to play great blues solos on guitar. And I'm being totally serious here, okay? The things that I'm going to be covering in this tutorial will spice up your playing 100%, I promise you, okay? There's a lot of material to cover here, so I'll probably stretch it out across 2 different videos, if not 3. But let's get right to it, dive into the basics. Now, most of us know the standard minor pentatonic scale, right? In this case, I'm doing it in the key of A. Okay, and it's important to know that in its linear form as well. Okay, and of course you can play those up here an octave higher, but for right now, let's just keep it all right in this area to focus on what I'm going to be talking about, okay? Now, in addition to the standard minor pentatonic scale, we might know the blues version of it, where we add the flat 5 in a couple of different spots. And that gives it a little bit more edge, a little bit more flavor, right? And of course, we can do that in the linear shape as well. But here's the deal. Once we learn those scales and we realize that they sound pretty good, you know, if we've got a blues backing track or somebody playing rhythm guitar underneath us, we kind of just start living there, if you know what I mean. We just rely on those scales over and over and over again. And in many cases, we wind up playing the same licks all the time. We're doing our hammer-ons in the same spot, doing the same old slides and pull-offs, and it just becomes a habit to play that way, right? But here's the deal. The reason we fall into that so easily is because it sounds great when you've got a nice blues backing track going on, right? Right? It sounds pretty good. It sounds fine. But here's the deal. If you take the backing away, if you take the backing track or your rhythm guy away and you don't hear those blues changes, the classic 1-4-5, it doesn't really sound like you're playing much of anything in particular. It just sounds like, you know, it sounds cool and everything, but it just sounds like basically you're noodling with the A minor pentatonic scale, right? So how do you make it more interesting? What's the first thing you want to do, the jumping off point, to really make your solos sound tasty? Because when all's said and done, you'll notice that you can't really tell what I'm playing over when I play like that. You're not really hearing the changes go by. You need that backing track to do it. But what the really good blues players do is they get inside those chords, right? You've basically got 3 chords, in this case an A7, a D7, and an E7, or a D9 and an E9 if you want. And they want to get inside the chords, and they do it first and foremost, this is the first tool, by targeting the thirds. And many of my students over the years will be familiar with this approach, okay? Because I've shared it with so many. But basically, you'll be able to hear the chords going by within the improvisation that I'm doing without even a backing track or anything. Right? You can hear exactly what I'm talking about. You can actually hear that blues progression, those blues changes within my improvisation. So what I'm doing, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm targeting the major third of each of those chords, because that gives us just a few more notes that really color the blues soloing up, because they get inside those particular chords as they're happening. It takes a little bit of practice for sure, but it's well worth it, believe me, okay? So let me do a little brief improvisation with that backing track, and you can hear that it sounds even richer. Now, there's so much more that you can do than that, and I'll be covering that as we progress through this concept. But the first thing you want to do is learn how to target those thirds, okay? So if you're on an A7 chord, the first chord in the progression, the major third is on the 6th fret on the G string. That's a C sharp note. Thirds rule the chord. They define whether a chord is major or minor, whether a scale is major or minor, and so on. So they're very, very important notes, which we'll dive into even more again as we progress. So the first third that you want to spot is for that A7 chord. So if you're playing the A minor pentatonic scale, there's your major third for that A7 chord. And while that A7 chord is being played in the progression, that's an excellent note to target, okay? There it is again if you're thinking of that linear form. There's a C sharp right there, okay? So there's a couple of spots that you can target that note. You can also target it if you're thinking of the linear form again. There's a C sharp on the 9th fret of the first string. So all of that is available to you over that first chord, that A7 chord. So you can see what I did there. I just targeted those C sharp notes while that A7 chord was going by. Now, when it changes to the 4 chord, which is going to be a D7 or a D9, as we said, the major third changes. You can no longer use that C sharp. It will clash with the chord. But the D chord, the D7 or D9, has a major third of F sharp in it. So there's an F sharp at the 4th fret on the D string that you can add in there and capture that D chord, okay? It's also on the 7th fret on the B string. So you can see how you're altering the scale so subtly, you might say, to capture the chords, okay? So here's what you might target over the D chord, the 4 chord. Right back to A7. So that's a great exercise right there, right? Because you want to practice being on top of the changes, being on top of the chords as they go by. Now, when you go to the 5 chord, which is E7 or E9, once again, the previous thirds do not work. They'll clash with that chord. So you want to switch to the major third of that particular chord, which is now a G sharp. And you can see it's on the 6th fret on the D string and also on the 9th fret on the B string. Again, just staying within this distance of the fretboard, so to speak, right? So when it goes to that E9 chord or E7, you want to be on top of that, right? And then it's going to move back to D9. You can just hear it, right? When I play the chord and then play a phrase and then back to A7. Ending on the 5 chord, right? So once again, I'm going to keep it super simple and just target those notes visually for the video so that you can see them and hear how important they are. that's kind of a blatant use of it, right? But that's the whole point, is to show you visually where that's at. And like I said, it can take a bit of practice. You know, you've really got to get into it, listen to the changes, try to stay on top of them, and you'll be surprised at how cool it can actually sound. And of course, you want to be able to do that in the higher octave as well. But for this particular lesson, just part one, we just want to talk about that, the simple act of targeting the thirds and how much that can change your blues playing. Because once you get it into the usual guitar characteristic stuff, hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, bends, man, you can really start to hear some great sounds come out, okay? And as mentioned earlier, there's so much more that you can do because thirds rule the chord, as I said. They inform you as to everything you can do that can spice up your blues playing, adding double stops, chord scales, arpeggios, everything. So I'll be covering all of that in this series as we progress. But once again, be sure to add those guitar characteristics that are unique to us, right? You can't bend a note on a piano or slide it or whatever, right? And so hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, bends, they all add color while you're staying on top of these changes. So I definitely encourage you to explore this basic concept of just adding the thirds, okay? And once again, you want to do it up high as well. We'll maybe discuss that a little bit later, but for now, just grab a basic blues backing track in A major, A7, D7, E7, whatever you like, and maybe start with a slow track, a really nice laid back track. There's tons of them right all over the internet, especially right here on YouTube, and just practice hanging with the changes, getting those major thirds in there. I think you'll find your playing starting to take on some new color. Okay. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be covering the double stops and the chord scales and arpeggios and things like that as we progress along. Okay, enjoy.